So there's a motion on tomorrow, and that motion is specifically around the attempt by Arud Shah to rewrite history and what's took place around the CSE in Oldham. Remember, the starting point of this is they claimed barefaced lies, then they were dragged kicking and screaming, and when they were forced to finally admit it, they focused on saying it wasn't a widespread cover-up, that to this day they won't name how many children, and no one's been convicted. Definitely no one who failed the children, never mind the perpetrators. And what Arud Shah wants to do, as soon as she's come back in as leader of the council, is she wants to kill any chance of a public inquiry by writing to the government and trying to say, manipulate the electorate to say, oh yeah, we wrote to the government and we got them to implement a whole host of recommendations. Now, those recommendations have got absolutely nothing to do with what's actually took place in Oldham. What she wants to happen is the national inquiry that took place into child sex exploitation in its widest context and excluded grooming, which is why the Pakistani rape gangs completely excluded that, which is why the Telford inquiry took place. She wants to focus on that, first of all. Secondly, she wants to focus on saying that everyone else was failing children at the time, so it doesn't matter, but we did our best here in Oldham. And the third thing she wants to focus on is this victims charter, which is it is nonsense. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's absolute nonsense. It's gobbledygook nonsense. And finally, she wants to make it look as though she's doing something locally by changing the rules of the constitution to say elected members have got to report it when they find out. And I'm laughing my head off on that, because really? You really think elected members have got to report it when they find out? Like they don't have to report it already. It's a statutory duty. They're all corporate parents. They all have to report it anyway. And if they want that if they want to introduce that element of elected members needing to report it if they find out, the question then for me is an obvious one. Which elected members didn't report it when they knew? Is that not how it should work? If they want to change the rules to say elected members from now on, if you know about it, you've got to report it. Well, the obvious question I've got to have is, well, if you knew about it before, why didn't you do it? Who are the ones who knew about it and didn't? Well, we all know who, don't we? It's James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, kept it from all of you. And his team of senior councillors kept it from all of you, and his council officers, including the chief executive, kept it all from you. And when we all knew about it after we released, and it's, I go back to this man, Warren Bates. I don't know if he's here this evening, but I go back to Warren Bates, insisting I see him, putting that stuff in front of me, going and then seeing Hughie MacDonald and risking my life and putting the stuff out there and campaigning for the last 4 years. And that's what's took place. And they want to rewrite history and pretend they are brilliant, everything's okay here, and they are nationally leading, and whatever went wrong, everyone else was doing it anyway. Let's bring up the original motion from Arud Shah and Councillor Shahid Mushtaq. So that should not be lost on any of us, that the person putting forward the motion is a Pakistani woman, and the person seconding the motion is the Pakistani deputy leader, Shahid Mushtaq. That shouldn't be lost on any of us when the grooming gangs were predominantly Pakistani, but that seems to be by the by with these people. There's no shame here. There's no acknowledgement of what the Home Secretary referred to herself as issues within the Pakistani community. That's not me, and it's not racist. It's, the Home Secretary. Never mind. And also victim after victim after victim. And we don't want to look at any of that. And she's put this motion to kill it and manipulate the town. And the idea behind manipulating the town is when they knock on the doors at the next election, they can say, oh, no, we passed the resolution, we passed the motion, we've done everything. They think you're stupid. And sadly, a lot of people are. And worse, a lot of people are out there looking for something to claim they've done. You know the types, the Jeremy MT Sutcliffes, the Bashforth. I don't know what Councillor Bashforth has done. I remember Maggie and her team saying he was going to support a public inquiry I don't know what, whether he'll even turn up to the vote and whether he will vote or not tomorrow. But we'll find out. So this was the original amendment. I'll bring it up first and let's pull out some of the key elements of it, and then we'll systematically go through Lewis's amendments to it. That's what I want. So you should be able to see all of that in one go. So this is, you can see, moved by Ari Shah and seconded by Councillor Mushtaq. The council note, a year on for the publication of the Oldham Assurance Review into historic safeguarding practices in Oldham and the subsequent publication of the recommendations of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse, led by Professor Alexis J, both finding institutional failings and that much more is needed to instill confidence in victims and survivors that adequate support and justice will be secured when complaints are made to officials. So what they're doing straight away is linking this national inquiry, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse, and the Oldham CSE review. So that's what you want to first of all look at. The council notes that the findings in the Oldham Assurance Review into historic safeguarding practice in Oldham found a clear political commitment and a sustained attempt to develop best practice in addressing the threat of child sex exploitation. So they first of all want to pat themselves on the back. They want to claim that they had a clear political commitment. A clear political commitment. They never had a clear political commitment. The evidence shows that their commitment was to keep it from the public and to hide it up. That's the evidence in the own review. So that's an outright lie. That's an outright lie. The next one is the council believes that this commitment was shared by many dedicated frontline workers working hard to protect vulnerable young people. What the review found on this specific bit, what the review found was that they had systemic failures. Remember, they only had one person who was the link from their messenger team. Remember, and how things got lost all the time, how the police officers knew children were being dragged off the streets and being raped and reported it and everything got lost. So that's complete nonsense. Yeah. It was clear, however, that there were unacceptable systemic failures. So the failures didn't belong to any person, it belonged to the system to provide support and justice to victims and survivors and to hold offenders to account for the abuse they carried out. This is the interesting bit. Hold offenders to account. They have already deleted those that failed them. They've already deleted the police officers, the council officers and the police and the politicians. They've omitted all of those and they're focusing exclusively on the offenders. The council notes that the response from the Mayor of Greater Manchester and Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police and the promise to review cases as part of Operation Sherwood. Okay, the Greater Manchester Mayor commissioned the report and has run away. The Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police last week or the week before has changed his narrative. Remember when he first apologised and he stood up and said, "You have nowhere to hide, we are coming for you"? Well, now he's saying, "We'll do everything reasonably possible." He's not saying the full weight of the law anymore because his hands have been tied. So that is the interesting backdrop of that. And of course, the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, is now refusing to explain why he undertook an assurance review, which is an internal evaluation, rather than bring in a judge-led independent inquiry or go to the government for a public inquiry. And of course, Operation Sherwood has been flawed from the outset because the first thing Operation Sherwood did was go and threaten a victim, a survivor. The council believes that the findings of the National Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse further demonstrated a failure to provide support and justice to victims and survivors across the country and to hold offenders to account for the abuse they carried out. So straight away, here you go. We're not to blame. This was happening across the country. Moreover, the inquiry identified that significant reform was needed and made 20 recommendations for change. Of course, the recommendations for change were nothing to do with the grooming gangs, because this independent inquiry, this national independent inquiry, was criticised for its absence of looking at group-based child sex exploitation. The Telford was meant to be included. It was then excluded, which is why we had the Telford judge-led independent inquiry. That's a matter of fact. That's not my opinion. That's a matter of fact. So this national independent inquiry into child sex abuse did not look at the group-based grooming, the Pakistani rape gangs as we know them. It did not look at that. So these 20 recommendations are not the recommendations linked to what took place in Oldham. Do you see? So why are you bringing that in? And secondly, what had I say on that national investigation is it's a national investigation that reports to government anyway. There is no need whatsoever for a council to write to the government to say, can you implement these recommendations? There's no need. The government are doing it anyway. It's like me writing to, I don't know, the imam at the mosque or something and say, can you make sure that the sun rises tomorrow? Can you write to, Mecca to make sure the sun rises tomorrow? Some nonsense. You understand what I'm getting at. It's happening anyway. It's got nothing to do with them and they're powerless in that. But what they're trying to do is convolute what's taking place. So that's what Arooj Shah's doing. And she thinks she's clever doing this. And by the way, she's not written this. And Shahid Mushtaq hasn't written this. This has clearly been written by Harry Caffrell and his team. That's where this has come from. So they're all complicit. The council notes the response from government to the findings of the report and to the recommendations for reform proposed by the investigation panel. The council believes that public confidence is essential in combating child sex abuse and exploitation, and that public awareness and transparency on the characteristics of abuse and how it presents in various forms are important to the public. So what they want to do here, they want to hide the Pakistani rape gangs with all the other forms of child abuse and child sex abuse that goes on. So they want to convolute it. So that's what that's about. We have a specific problem with Pakistani rape gangs, but let's talk about all the other types of failings to do with child sex exploitation that might not necessarily have been as relevant in Oldham, and let's convolute it and hide this issue. They don't want to deal with this issue. So that's what this is about. And these are the actual things that they are recommending. So let me highlight that. The council resolves that the chief executive, and those of you who've been with me on this journey for some time knows how funny this is, the chief executive write to the Home Office. So they want the chief executive to write to the Home Office. And they want them to write to the Home Office and first of all write and say, this report that had nothing to do with us, that you commissioned anyway, can you make sure that the government implements them? Nonsense. The next thing they want to do is following the National Independent Inquiry. See, again, the National, led by Professor J. They are joining this up as though this National Inquiry, led by Alexis J, is anything at all like the Oldham Assurance Review. This introducing both of those things and saying them in the same sentence. It's like me saying I went to one of the chicken shops in Union Street, Yorkshire Street, and adding and in the same sentence making reference to a Michelin star restaurant, and somehow saying one is the same as the other. Absolute nonsense. The government will support the final stage assurance review announced by the Mayor of Greater Manchester. Now, why should the government support something that the Greater Manchester Mayor has commissioned independently? Why should the government endorse something that is already underway? You know why? Because they want the government to protect them from a public inquiry. So by passing this motion, they say, oh, well, the government didn't want a public inquiry. They're happy with the assurance review. That's what that is. It's about trying to legitimise the assurance review and safeguard Andy Burnham and safeguard Arud Shah and safeguard JIM McMAHON. So that's the first thing they want to do. Next thing they want to do is the council further resolve that the chief executive writes to the borough members of parliament. So that's McMahon, Rayner and Debbie Abrahams. So they want to write to the MPs, who will then make representation to the Home Office supporting the council request. So they want the MPs to back up the council on the recommendations that they have no say over. And then they also want to do, further resolve, is they want a victims and survivors charter in consultation with victims and survivors groups, highlighting the rights and support which will be provided to those affected by child sex abuse and exploitation. They want to take it away. They want to take it away. They want to take it away and focus on, look, we're helping the victims and survivors, not getting justice, but helping the victims and survivors with the trauma. Next, they want to support work, further work. The word further is interesting because what work have they done? I don't know. But they've introduced the word further to raise public awareness amongst young people in all relevant settings and with the general public to support prevention, early identification of child sexual abuse and exploitation, and to promote the greater reporting of safeguarding concerns. How? No idea. How the council further resolves to do this, they have no idea, because these two things are in the council's power, the Victim and Survivors Charter and raising public awareness. They can't even admit to the Pakistani rape gangs. To develop and adapt a mandatory duty to report safeguarding concerns enshrined in the Code of Conduct for elected members, and consult on the duty for officials employed by the council. Completely unnecessary because the law already says they have to do this. Completely unnecessary. And the council resolves that the chief executive, as well as writing to the MPs, he writes to the Mayor of Greater Manchester in his capacity as Police and Crime Commissioner to support in the development of a Victim and Survivors Charter. It's nonsense. This charter is nonsense. Outlining the rights of those affected by child sexual abuse. What on earth is that all about? The rights of those affected by child sex abuse. The rights are when they report it, the police should go and arrest them, and when the council know about it, they shouldn't look to cover it up. How can we talk about rights when we've not acknowledged the exact failings? So they want to move on and cover things up. And the last bit is they want to update Operation Sherwood. They want an update, but not an update to the full council. They want an update to the behind closed doors to the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Board. So that's what they want to do. Let me pause here. So this went out last week. I shared it last Sunday. The opposition have all had a chance to look at it. The independents haven't put forward a motion. FIP have put forward their own separate motion, which you all know about, but they've not put forward, the independents have not put forward an amendment to this. And I don't know why. My understanding is they're still finding their feet and all of that, and fair dues to them. So that's fair enough. It's their first meeting, so I think you can't expect too much of them, and this has come too much too quickly. I get that. The Lib Dems have amended it, but slightly. Irrelevant. Irrelevant how they've amended it. But the Conservatives, very late, it went in this morning. The deadline was midday, and it went in just before midday. And Lewis Quigg and Dave ARNOTT, to give them their due, have come forward and said, we are not standing for this. We are not standing for the rewriting of history, and we are not playing along. Now, this didn't come from the Conservative leadership, which you would have expected it to. It did not come from Graham Sheldon, and it did not come from Cameron Gaffer, who were the leader and the deputy. It came from Lewis Quigg, and it came from Dave ARNOTT. And this amendment, you've got to respect them. If FIP did this, I'd respect them. If a Labour councillor did this, I'd respect them. If Sam Al-Hamdani did this, I'd respect him. So you've got to respect these people for what they're doing, because they're putting their careers on the line, making these amendments and proposing this. And they're probably going against those in their own party. Now, you'll have to excuse the Green, because the way amendments happen is, and I'll explain it to you, what a councillor has to do is cross out in red the words he wants to get rid of. That's what an amendment is. And put in green what he wants it replaced with. So this is the amendment. Moved by Councillor Lewis Quigg and seconded by Councillor Dave ARNOTT. They put their names to it. And you can see, I'll go through the bits they've crossed out first. The council notes that the findings in the Oldham Assurance Review into historic safeguarding practice in Oldham found a clear political commitment and a sustained attempt to develop best practice. Bollocks, complete lie. Lewis and Dave are having none of it, crossed it out. Because that's not true, is it? So what they've done is they've completely got rid of the nonsense about the council finding clear political commitment and a sustained attempt. You can see they've crossed that out. They've completely crossed that out. And what they've replaced it with, which is this green text, is this. How novel. How novel. This council notes and apologises to the survivors of the horrific crimes of child sexual exploitation in Oldham. It notes with disappointment that the Assurance Review did not go far enough to make conclusions beyond the narrow terms of reference that it was set, and which can only really be met by a full public inquiry. For many, the failures only scratch the surface given the scale of criminality in areas such as Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford. The Assurance Review only assured the Council and Greater Manchester Police that whilst there were failings in the past, that they are now attempting to right that wrong today. This is not good enough, and it only adds to the belief that there is a cover-up and an attempt to address the large-scale negligence and criminality of those involved. So you can see straight away, bang, brilliant. They then also get rid of the next bit. The council believes that this commitment was shared by many dedicated frontline, so they all did everything possible. No. As the Home Secretary, Shuella Breverman, identified, political correctness was too often to blame for child sexual abuse signs being overlooked. This saw institutions and state agencies, whether social workers, teachers, the police, turn a blind eye to those signs of abuse out of political correctness, out of fear. There you go. This saw institutions and state agencies, whether social workers and teachers, the police, turn a blind eye to those signs of abuse out of political correctness, out of fear of being called racist, out of fear of being called bigoted. As a result, they fail to bring justice to those victims and survivors. Justice delayed is justice denied. To this day, those who worked and held positions of authority within Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council and at Greater Manchester Police who were in duty of care have not been held to account for their failures. No one, no matter how high or low in an important public role or organisation, should be exempt from the law. We cannot ignore the negligence of public officials. The failure to do the right thing ultimately failed survivors and allowed criminals to get away with this horrific crime. Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council and Greater Manchester Police cannot be allowed to continue to effectively mark their own homework. Yeah. Powerful, yeah? Absolutely brilliant. Indeed, mate. So I'm talking to David Kidman. This is courage. This. And I don't get on with them all the time. But I've said to you all along, I will stand by what's right, whoever does what's right. This is right. This is courage. These are conservatives calling out the institutions. The conservatives don't call out institutions. But here we've got the conservatives calling out the institutions. It's unheard of. Justice delayed is justice denied. What they are saying is those who failed our children need to be held to account. Large-scale negligence and criminality. The council, and they add a bit more. The council notes the response from the Mayor of Greater Manchester and Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police and the promise to review cases as part of Operation Sherwood. However, Operation Sherwood does not go far enough nor meet the expectations of the public and survivors. Yes, that's what the survivors have said. As was set out to the full council back in July last year, Greater Manchester Police must deliver justice and they must follow the evidence beyond the 11 cases identified. Remember, they finally admitted last week that Operation Sherwood was only looking at those 11 cases. And they must go beyond that without fear or favour. Political correctness, political stakeholders and cultural sensitivities must not get in the way of a full and proper pursuit of justice. Let me read that sentence again. Political correctness, political stakeholders. We know what that means. This is clever. Political correctness, political stakeholders and cultural sensitivities must not get in the way of a full and proper pursuit of justice. Wow. Victims and survivors must not be failed by public officials again. And it's an amendment because it keeps bits in, but it amends little bits as we go along, or key bits as it go along, or takes out nonsense. This is a political lesson for everyone else. This is how you write an amendment. And it had nothing to do with me. These guys put it in at the last moment. I imagine they fought long and hard and went to their party, and I reckon their party said no. I reckon Sheldon said no. I reckon Cameron Gaffer with his links to Naila Ibrahim. Naila Ibrahim's Cameron Gaffer's cousin. Yes, the Labour Party councillor Naila Ibrahim, who was in Gloddick and now moved to Werneth, is Cameron Gaffer's cousin. Ask her, ask him. Arud Shah's linked to him. And these two men have risked their political careers doing this. They've risked being suspended by the Conservative Party by doing this. Because there's clearly a secret agreement. They are speaking for you, me and everyone else. It is, however, important to remember that we must seek justice for all the victims of this crime in Oldham, and that Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council and Greater Manchester Police cannot blame their failures on prevailing cultural attitudes, prejudices, or bureaucracies elsewhere in the country, or the passage of time. It was too long ago, or everyone else was doing it. No. Because this only adds to the belief that there is a cover-up and an attempt to deflect from the failures here in Oldham. This is Lewis now. I know it's Lewis. I'm laughing my head off. It is a fact that abusing children has been a crime since at least the introduction of the Prevention of Cruelty to and Protection of Children's Act of 1889. You don't need to put it in your bloody councillors whatever. It's been a crime since 1889. and all subsequent acts of Parliament since. No matter how long ago, abusing children is an evil crime. He's mocking them. Why do you need a duty to report it? It's been a crime since 1889. You were meant to be reporting it anyway, you rape gang protectors. Who were you protecting? Your cousins, your uncles, your brothers? Who? The bloke who makes you the samosas? Hands over the postal vote sacks? What? Who? And who was protecting them? Oldham should be leading the way in prosecuting all those who failed our children, not following the failure and lack of action elsewhere. And then it goes on to the actual motion. So this is the background context. You can see it's bang, bang, bang. They've gone for him. They've gone for him. It's brilliant. So let's look at the motions, right? Yeah, write to them. Say, adopt the 20 recommendations. We don't care. Write to them. We agree with that. Write to them. If that makes you feel better, write to them. But the second bit, write to the Home Office. The Chief Executive writes to the Home Office. And this is the bit. And say the government will, not support, look to go further and beyond the final stage assurance review announced by the Greater Manchester Mayor. The terms of which reference, which will include current operational practice across blah, 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 by granting a full public inquiry into the historic allegations of child sexual exploitation within Oldham Borough Council. So what they're saying, it doesn't matter what the mayor's doing. We want the government to go beyond and support a full public inquiry. And formally request a full public inquiry into the historic allegations of CSE within the Oldham Borough Council area. So that's what they want the Chief Executive to write to the Home Office to request. Not everything's okay, but we want a full public inquiry. The council further resolves that the Chief Executive writes to the MPs. Remember, they wanted to write to the MPs and say it's all great. No, they want the Chief Executive to write to the MPs and ask them to support a full public inquiry into the historic allegations of child sexual exploitation within Oldham Metropolitan Borough. And furthermore, they want the MPs, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. Let me just highlight this. They want the MPs to table a private members' bill, an opposition day debate, and lobby Her Majesty's government, His Majesty's government, to change the law to make it easier to prosecute public officials for failing to protect the most vulnerable in our society. And if that wasn't enough, in terms of the internal bit, they're happy with it. They said, fine, you know, you can have all of this. You can have your victims charter. You can support further work. You can have your mandatory duty to report safeguarding concerns. But this is the nice bit. You can write to your mayor to support the victims charter. All that's fine. We're happy for all of that work to go on as well. That's an update on Operation Sherwood to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Board and a full meeting of Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council with the public being able to ask questions in person at the meeting. So they want members of the public, you and me, to be able to ask rather than this stuff to take place in hiding. So this motion by Councillors Lewis, Quigg and Dave ARNOTT, the Conservative councillors from Royton North, we owe the people of Oldham, the Metropolitan Borough of Oldham, every survivor, every father, every mother, every grandparent, everyone who has fought against this, we owe them our gratitude. And this motion will be voted on. And we will, well, Let's see, shall we? I'm hoping that the independents that we've supported support this amendment. And don't let any political silliness get in the way of supporting this because they're conservatives. Because at this moment in time, they are not conservatives. First and foremost, they are the representatives of the people of this town, and they are fighting for us. No one else has done this. They put this in hours before the deadline today. So if you've not the courage to do this, or you've not the skills to do this, and this is a skillful amendment, the least you can do is support it. So please, my plea to the other independents is support this. I plead to the Failsworth independents who've got their own motion. The motion, they can't even spell the word inquiry right. This is an amendment. This amendment is actually their motion. Articulated and presented and focused in a way they couldn't, is beyond Brian Hoban and his team. And that's not meant as a criticism. It's just, some things are beyond you. And writing this amendment in this way is beyond them. So my plea to Hoban and his team is support this. You've got to put your differences aside for the betterment of the town, and you've got to support this. You can't look at someone and say, oh, if he is voting for it, I'm not voting for it. Because we've not put you there. None of us here, none of us in the town have supported the independents to be bickering in the council chamber. So I plead to Councillor Mark Ince, to Maggie Hurley, to Sandra, I think Sandra's away, to Aftab even, to support this. And then we will see which one of the Labour Party oppose this. And we will campaign against those who oppose this. And this is the amendment to look out for at tomorrow's council meeting. These two men have risked their political careers doing this. I'm genuinely interested to see what the other Conservatives do. Because they can't support the other thing, the actual motion, saying we've done all right. And I'm sure they'll ask for a recorded vote. They have to ask for one, and they'll ask for one. I'm sure they'll ask for one. There are, and in this journey of ours, there have been key moments, watershed moments, landmark events. And this amendment is a landmark event. Because this amendment by the Conservative and mainstream party attacking the very institutions of this town and fighting on behalf of who? Working class children. It's not their voter base. It has to be applauded. It has to be supported. And everyone who's ever engaged with me, who's in that council chamber, must put aside the political differences and the petty bickering. Or am I reading the room wrong? Is this not what we all want? How it's been articulated and framed here, is this not what every one of us want? We want our MPs to fight for us. Our MPs should be demanding a public inquiry. Our MPs should be going in there for a private member's motion. And on that, I'll finish it, Sheila. What an incredible piece of work. You, every one of us. And yes, Denise, this has been our wish for too long. So Labour thought they'd get away with it. And these two lads, despite the reservations in their party, despite Failsworth independents putting their own motion, they realised it wasn't good enough, and there are moments in life that define you. You can look the other way, or you can do something about it. And this is one of those moments. And it will be defining for both of those men. Because whatever wrongs they may have done in the past or will do in the future, when it mattered most, when it mattered on this, they stood up for the town. They stood up for the children of our town. They stood up for every one of us. It's easy giving it the big bollocks talk. But when it came down to it, they delivered. I'll be back tomorrow. I will put the transmission on, I think just on YouTube or something, or with a Telegram link. But if the Telegram links, by the way, are free, you know, the Telegram channel's free. Any links I put them on Telegram are free. You just click it and you watch it, the same as you've always done. But I'll do the watch along. If you're new to me, please do subscribe to Telegram. If you're new to me and you don't pay the 99 pence, please consider buying me a coffee. And I'll see you tomorrow. Well done, Lewis Quigg. Well done, Dave ARNOTT. Courage.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.